What's going on, guys? Toy and Timber Outdoors here with Lucky Tackle Box, and today we're going to break down some easy and essential ways to figure out what bugs are actually hatching on the water. Now, there are typically 4 main types of bugs that when you see something going on above the water, we can classify them. Now, this excludes terrestrials like grasshoppers, beetles, ants, as well as, bait fish and other types of things with exoskeletons that fish do eat. We're breaking down basically the 4 main types of bugs that we're going to see hatching in trout waters. Now, the first and most common that most people talk about when we're talking about fishing for trout is the mayfly. The mayfly is typically characterized by a sailboat-style wing and long, thin body. They can be in a variation of different sizes, but for the most part, they're one of the main staple food sources that you see in spring, summer, and even in the fall, depending on where you live in the United States, North America, or the world. Now, they're going to be a normal size of about maybe anywhere from 12 to 18. Again, variations depending on what bugs we're talking about. But they will also be about the same size typically, or around the same size, can be the same size as a caddisfly. A caddisfly, okay, the biggest way you can tell the difference between a mayfly and a caddisfly is that a caddisfly typically has its wings folded behind it. These flies are also another very common food source for trout. Their larva stage, their larval and pupal stages are a little different, and we imitate them in different ways with different flies, but we'll cover that in a bit. The third main type of bug that I typically like to see on the water, and it's usually a very fun hatch, is a stonefly. Stoneflies are much larger, typically, than mayflies and caddisflies, and they're usually characterized more so by antennae out the front that are fairly pronounced, as well as 2 pointed pieces of abdomen that stick out past, like 2 tails. They also lay their wings back. However, you'll be able to notice they're different because you'll be able to see the segmentation differences and the size variation compared to the mayfly and the caddisfly. And the last main staple food source I like to talk about typically when we're talking about trout, and this is a big one, is a midge or chironomid. Now, these are very small typically, alright? So small, in fact, that the dry fly imitation that we use to imitate them is actually imitating a bundle of them, mating on the surface. Alright, they look like mosquitoes, but they do not have a mouth to sting and to draw with. Instead, however, we can characterize them as just very tiny, mosquito-like insects, lay their transparent wings back across their bodies, okay? And if you notice that there's a haziness in the air, but you can tell it's actually insect activity, probably going to be midges or chironomids. When we want to imitate mayflies, we have a variation of really good patterns, anywhere from very simple imitative patterns like large zebra midges in variations of colors, prince nymphs, hare's ears, you name it. And the one that we typically use to imitate them most often in its dry fly stage is the Adams. Okay? It could be a variation of the Adams, a parachute type Adams, but an Adams is a good pattern. When we're talking about the caddisfly, now the larval and pupal stages of the caddisfly can usually have some green in them, alright? But again, we can use the same types of patterns in those variations, just different colors. And then the biggest difference is the dry fly, one of the most common, and in my opinion, one of my favorite flies to imitate the caddis in its adult stage on the water is an elk-hair caddis. Elk-hair caddis catches so many fish, it's insane. Those two are more so spring, summer, fall patterns, but depending on where you are, that might change. The stonefly, one of my favorite stonefly patterns. Okay, there are so many really good stonefly patterns depending on what type of stonefly you're imitating. There are variations in colors, but you can go from very suggestive to very precise imitations. But nymphs in those are really good as anchor flies in certain systems as well. And my favorite imitation above the surface for dry flies is a stimulator pattern. Now for midges are tied anywhere from sizes 30, 28, 26, 24, all the way up to probably an 18 or 16 at the very largest. And one neat thing about the chironomid patterns is that you can fish them all year long. They are one of the four. They are in the water the longest, and in fact, all winter, fish will eat on midge patterns. And if you want to imitate the midge on the surface, a Griffith's gnat is probably my favorite imitation for dry flies in midges or chironomids. So, next time you're on the water and you see one of these variations, remember, you're already off to a great start because you can find flies that will imitate them. The only key thing you really need to worry about, in my opinion, after that, is the shade and the size of the fly. Try and match the size of the fly you see in the patterns according to the naturals that are there. And if you notice that they're a little darker, try a darker fly. If they're a little lighter, try a lighter shade fly. That right there is by far and away the greatest advice I ever received as a new fly angler in how to choose which fly out of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of patterns that are available to you. One great way to do that, if you stick with Lucky Tackle Box, they provide you with great patterns that are great interpretations of insect life around North America, and again, information from me, from other professionals in both written form in the magazine as well as video form like this. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, check out the other videos in the playlists and the other how-to videos that we're going to be coming out with for Lucky Tackle Box in the fly fishing world. Until next time, guys, catch you guys on the flip side. Tight lines, and we're out.